Hi, welcome everybody. I'm Barry Kostrinsky. This is Artist Talk on Art, the ATOA. This is our first talk of 2021. Welcome everybody. We have a very exciting talk today. Charlie Rubin has organized artists using photography in different ways. A little bit about the ATOA. We've been around, this is our 47th year. We've always been on the Lower West Side of New York City. Currently, we're obviously not having in-person talks. But before the pandemic, we were at 12 West 12th Street on the Lower West Side of New York City. When things are better and we can go back to our venue, we will, but we will keep these talks going. They have been sort of a windfall in an odd way. We've been able to get people from Mexico, from Venice, Italy, from California, and even Indiana. It's been a real joy. And it's obviously a little bit easier for people to gather together. We are a 501c3. All of our programming is for free. If you'd like to make a donation or a contribution, you can see the information on our website. And it's very much appreciated, obviously. Keep in mind, this is a Zoom talk. If you want to mute yourself, mute yourself. We can hear everything that goes on in the background. I don't mute everybody. We sort of like the idea of people jumping in with questions and comments. And by the way, it can be a statement, a simple statement like, I find the work very beautiful or whatever you like. And this way we keep a very engaged audience and we keep participation, and often our group offers very good questions. So without further ado, I do want to say we have a YouTube channel. This will be captured through Zoom recording, and I'll put it on our YouTube channel with somewhat of a detailed description of what the artists have said and presented. And then whatever, let's say it's an hour and a half, will be on our YouTube page. It is Artist Talk on Art under YouTube. There is a chat function. You can chat in there and make comments as you like. Any questions you have at any time, we're sort of open for that. The brief intro, we have talked about photography a lot. And I think that's great. I think this is our 38th Monday virtual talk. And as a result, we've hit certain topics over and over again in certain media and materials. And photography is certainly one of them. In ways, photography is the most pluralistic of all medias. Everyone has a cell phone, and we think it's a camera, and we certainly use it as such. But then there are other artists who work with a camera, and somehow they get something else through their ocular. They're able to see, and it always amazes me how a sight that you might think is normal, somehow a photographer brings something to that through their device. And from what I've seen today, we have Maria Sprowls, Magali Duzon, Sylvia Hardy, and Charlie Rubin. Charlie Rubin is the organizer of this talk. We have 4 photographers who do just that. They really bring something through their vision, but they're also using the camera to make a statement or a point, just the way an artist might use a brush, or a drawer might use graphite, or maybe even an architect might use a building. So I think we're in for a treat. These are all artists that are new to us presenting at the ATOA. I want to welcome you all to organize a talk. At any time, you can reach out to me and say, hey, I want to do a talk on this. As long as you put together the artists, I'm going to say yes. And that's the way we sort of, yes, that was a little reverberation. I'm going to mute a few people. Sorry about that. Just double check. I think we took care of it. So sorry there. Yes, that does happen here. So I do want to say, if you want to put together a panel, go ahead, organize something. If you want to present, reach out to me. You can look at our website. We have some very interesting things coming. We may go over today. That sort of works. We're very casual and open. I want to introduce Charlie. Charlie, I met him in the South Bronx. I think a lot of his photography, he does what I said. Somehow he can look at the ordinary and make it extraordinary. He also is quite a colorist in that he'll usually, and I may be summarizing wrong, Charlie, but I feel you sometimes do a psychedelic coloring on an object in your photograph to sort of heighten it. You do a great job at it. Without me saying any more, I'm going to hand it to Charlie. He'll do a brief introduction, and then we'll go through Maria, Magali, Sylvia, and then Charlie will conclude. So Charlie, first I want to thank you. Thank you for organizing this talk. I'll ask everybody, maybe mute just in case, but we'll leave it up to you and unmute when you want to talk. So Happy New Year, Charlie, and thank you for putting it together.
Thanks, Barry. It's so nice. Thanks for asking me to do this. And shout out to Larry for introducing me. You know, when you first, it was a really nice introduction. And when you first asked me to do this, I think it was like a month or two ago. And I was thinking, okay, this is going to be 2021. This seems like a really long time from now. But then it kind of snuck up on us and it's here already. And it made me think of how each of these artists that we're about to see use time in their work in a way that's different. Whether it's like exploring the decay of something over time or creating new histories or thinking about the future or just documenting in an unusual way. I think that also ties together the artists we're about to see. We all met in Parsons one way or another. We went to school there and we've just stayed in touch and I've been following their work. And yeah, they're just all do what Bear was saying. And, you know, he did say that photography has become more ubiquitous, but somehow these artists find a way to make images unique in a way by either like reworking them in books or combining them with other images or, you know, making the work almost sculptural and printing it out in a way. So without further ado, let's get to it. I think we're going to start off with Maria. Is that okay? You're out there?
Yes, I'm over here.
All right, I'll sign off. Well, not sign off, but I'll let you take it.
Okay. Well, hi everybody. My name is Maria Sprowls. I'm a Mexican, New York-based photographer. I've been in New York for 10 years. I met Charlie in Parsons, and I do dedicate myself to photography. But I can walk you through a little bit through what I've been doing throughout the years. It was very exciting to kind of today review a little bit of what I've done. I can tell you that I'm always interested in kind of following the dynamics between people, sometimes between couples, sometimes between a mother and a child, sometimes between friends, and mostly between strangers, which means the relationship with my subject and myself. I did a body of work in Parsons where I wore a wedding dress for 2 years and I would photograph myself with men that I would meet in Central Park. I would set up a tripod, set up a camera. I don't have any of those pictures today, but I wanted to mention it so you know a little bit of my background. So every time we would just cross eyes with a man that was passing by Central Park, I would approach them and I would ask them if they would want to pose in a picture with me as if it was a marriage portrait. I collected so many of them. Sometimes I had assistants, sometimes I had an automatic release, but it was a very nice experience. I recently moved from apartments. We had to do some storage, cleaning, and I had to get rid of the wedding dress after 2 years. And it was a little bit strange. It was a little bit emotional, but you know, it's out. Maybe someone picked it and someone will use it. But I wanted to share with you a body of work I did after that. Can you guys see my slides?
No, not yet. Are you trying to share screen?
Yeah, not yet. Let's see. Desktop. I hope it works.
It's generally not the desktop you want to go to, but rather the app that has the pictures in it, which on some machines might be the desktop, but.
Thank you for saying that. That is exactly what we should be doing. Consistent preferences. I think I should have done this before. I never share screen and Charlie, if I send it to you, can you share it?
Sure.
Okay.
But you can do it. Are you on a Mac or a PC?
I'm on a Mac.
Easy. So then you're probably showing it from photos?
No, I did a Google slideshow.
In that case, you would want to navigate to that browser.
To Chrome, which is where I am now. I'm so sorry for this. I should have known better, right?
That's okay. This happens quite often, and this is a break. We are not on a tight schedule here, and I think often we worry about every second. There's an opportunity. I always like the way Larry has jumped in or Fran jumps in to help.
I really appreciate it. It tells me to go to system preferences, and it won't let me do anything.
Maria, I sent you a request to allow me to see it if you want me to try to pop it up.
Request from where, Charles?
Pony Express.
Yeah. Well, it's slowly getting there.
This is terrible. So I'll talk a little bit more about the work, even though you're not seeing it. So I did a lot of work like the one I told you in Parsons about the wedding dress. And then Craigslist was I was fascinated by Craigslist when I moved to New York City, especially coming from Mexico City, where they tell you all the time, don't speak to strangers. I felt so safe to speak to strangers in New York. So I did it all the time, and Craigslist was definitely the best place for me to speak to strangers. I think I allowed you, Charlie. Can you see it? Am I not sharing my screen? You guys are not seeing anything.
You're not, are you pushing the green share screen button?
Yeah.
And it's giving you a grid and you're choosing one?
Yep.
And you
Right.
push share and it's not sharing, huh?
Okay.
Try iCloud Drive.
Let me see if I can allow Charlie.
But when you select what you want in the share screen, then you have to hit another button that says share.
It only sends me, I approved you, Charlie. You can do it. So, speaking of Craigslist.
Oh, there we go.
Yay!
Charlie did it.
Charlie. Charlie's the man.
Bravo.
Now, Charlie, if you go to full screen on this.
Yeah, on
then-
present. So anyway, on Craigslist, I put an ad where I would want to contact women that had cheated on their partners, either their husbands, their wives, their partners, their girlfriends, their boyfriends, and if they wanted to talk to me so I could make some sort of project with them, maybe portraits, maybe just interview, maybe just audio. And Craigslist, somebody flagged me and said that what I just posted was immoral, which I found very interesting. Then I just redrafted the same post. And it was geared towards men who had cheated on their partners, and no one flagged me. And a bunch of men contacted me and they said they wanted to speak to me and share their stories. So I didn't think it was a good idea to take a picture of them because they were sharing very intimate information with me. So what we did is that we collected like emails and text messages and, little matchboxes that they had from the encounters they had with the people that they cheated on. And it was a really beautiful project. I mean, there's the whole infidelity thing, there's the betrayal. I was not trying to give a sense that cheating is a good thing to do, but it does have a different dimension. And there were these beautiful phantoms that people created in these relationships that existed outside established social contracts. So that body of work turned out to be only text-based. I retyped every single letter with a typewriter and no ink. So what I had was just the imprint of these super tactile, forbidden love letters with me. That led to the next project, that's what I'm going to show you very quickly, just a few images. I published a book in France that I made with a Magnum photographer. He was directing a residency. He invited me to participate, so I was in Marseille for a few months. And what I did there is that I encountered young girls, really, really young girls that they would tell me how they defined marriage and love and what they desire from that. But above all, they would tell me what it was their first sexual experience. Because it's supposed to be the super heightened experience for women, and it's supposed to be like the best thing ever, and it isn't. It's a little more real. Like, they all had a different feeling about it. Some of them just felt pressured into it. Some of them said, I really didn't even enjoy it. Some of them said, I did it with a boyfriend that I think I'm going to marry for the rest of my life. So they shared these stories with me, showing me the landscape of Marseille, that it's so peculiar. It's very beautiful, but it's also kind of dangerous. It's highly contaminated. It's a port of traffic. It's interesting. So I published a book called Goodbye, Miss, Adieu Mademoiselle. There was a group of feminists in France at the time that they wanted to get rid of the word mademoiselle from the vocabulary entirely because it alludes to virginity and to purity, and there's not the equivalent for men, which happens in so many languages, especially the ones that are Latin based, Romance languages. So that was one. So Charlie, can you move to the next one? So this is one of the subjects. I also scanned the stories that they would tell me about, you know, their love, their body, the way they conceived of themselves as sexual beings at such an early age. Then I started working full time in New York, and photography kind of stepped into the background. I have a lot of experience working with artists. I was very lucky to work with a performance artist for many years with Marina Abromovic. Then that was followed by being the studio director of Lawerence Weiner, a conceptual artist. And those were great experiences, and photography was always present, but they were very demanding jobs. So what I did is that I became kind of like an accidental street photographer, for the lack of a better word. And I documented a lot of children in the city, just children playing in different environments, and the dynamics between them when they are on their own too, with their own parents. It just became so magnetic to me. I feel a little sad because I really document. Charlie knows, he knows my work since a long time. I document it often. Groups from all sorts of children from all sorts of groups, from Latinos, from Jewish kids, from kids on the Upper West Side, from kids when I go to Harlem. Every kid has a story to tell. And I document them in museums, in gardens, in fountains, wherever they are. Ever since the pandemic, I have to say I feel a little sad to do it. All our dynamics, they feel so contained, so, you know, calculated. We've become children. They really communicate themselves through gesture and movement, and they hop, and they're doing so many things that the parents sometimes they're not even aware. And they see a bird and they flutter, and right now you can see that we are still in such heightened sense of alert that they don't flutter anymore. They're not jumping. They don't feel as free. And I feel that it's not a moment that I want to document. My work, luckily, it allowed me, my work with Lawerence and with Marina, it allowed me to travel. So I would document things around me too, from exhibitions they would be doing, the people that would come to the exhibitions, but more in a sense of who was just being in contact with their work and me allowing me to witness it. The last series that I've been developing more, in a more disciplined way. Can you do the next one, Charlie? It's this one, which I started before the pandemic, and I'm very happy I did. What I did is that I started collecting stories of women that would talk to me about a specific location that they connected to a moment of heartache. So I expected a lot of breakups, I expected a lot of that, but actually heartache comes from so many different places. The woman that you see on screen to the left, she was heartbroken because a friend of hers just stopped talking to her from one day to the other, and she never understood fully why. So she took me to the place where she remembers this happening. And at first I thought maybe it's not the right premise. I don't know how people will react. I know I attach a lot of content and emotional and sentimentality to site and to place. And it was wonderful to see that so many women did too. They took me to so many beautiful gardens. They took me to so many restaurant facades that they were like, I cannot walk past this restaurant because something happened to me here. So we explored ideas of separation, of, yeah, just pain. And it was very interesting because those conversations, the shoot itself would take maybe about 20, 25 minutes, but so many of them turned into like really long shoots. We would talk for about like 2 hours and a half. Some of them were women I knew. Some women came recommended to me by women that I had photographed already previously. So it became almost like this therapeutic encounter without me trying to pretend to be a therapist. I just wanted a document of you in a place that had painful connection. And it was so beautiful to see that so many of them were like actually happy to go back and heal that dynamic of pain and turn it into a new memory. The woman that you see on your screen, her name is Cristiana, and she was in her kitchen. So the range was extraordinary. And I'm very grateful I was working on this before the pandemic, because it makes me realize how much I moved within my own practice. And now, well, it's a little bit more limiting, you know? I cannot ask any subject to go to any place. I don't feel comfortable enough to ask them something like that. The next body of work that you're going to see a little bit, just a snippet, is the last thing I made during the pandemic. I published a little scene of photographs, and it was all of these very solitary New York City, abandoned restaurants set up, you know, like Titanic scenes. The whole dining table set up for people to come and have a drink and have a cocktail, and you can still hear the sound, but everything was just silent and dark, and you could see through windows. And the walks I would do to Manhattan, I live in Brooklyn, and they were so eerie. They were very painful. That image of the Oculus, the Calatrava building downtown Manhattan, it was very, I don't want to say sad. It was very puzzling that day, because I walked there and it was empty, and you could see the New Jersey Transit arriving, people getting off. You could see that it was workers, essential workers that were delivering food, that they were taking care of children, that they were working in hospitals. Very few of them, but just getting out of that train like an army to take care of the ones that we were not essential, that we were still alive, we were still looking for things, but we were not essential. So I published a little book with that. Charlie helped me with graphic design a little. And with sequencing, Charlie is very good at sequencing. He's very critical, which always helps me. And there are still a few copies available if anyone is interested. It's $20, but I'm happy to send you one. All of the proceeds of the sale of the scene, they went to the Loveland Foundation, which is a wonderful organization established by Rachel Cargile. She's a writer, and she provides therapy for women of color, particularly Black women and Black girls. So this is it. The last thing is, it's called Kiss It Goodbye, because it did feel like kissing New York goodbye, and, you know, each other and everything that was good. But I think that maybe it's a little more hopeful nowadays. And the last thing I want to say, if there's anybody based in New York City, I'm currently working at a photography museum as an exhibitions and programming manager. It's called Fotografiska. It's in Park Avenue South and 22nd Street. The Mother Museum is in Stockholm. It's been open for 10 years. It's a gorgeous institution presenting exclusively photography. And I joined the team in the middle of the pandemic, and it has been quite a wild ride, but it's a gorgeous place to go. We have very diverse exhibitions. So if anybody is in town and would like to pop by, please do let me know. But yeah, that's me. That's my work.
Nice. Thanks, Maria. That was amazing. Barry, how do you want to do this? Do you want to do questions, or should we move on and then do questions in the end?
I'd like to open it up to comments, just so we sort of keep engaged, because it can be hard to keep track. I just want to say, Maria, very interesting. It's obvious you start with an idea and a concept, and then the camera helps you fulfill it. As well, you said, you know, you started by asking a question of women if they cheated on men. And often art starts with something that sounds simple. And then when you put it in the public space, it opens up into something complex. And of course, you saw the sort of differences, the sort of prejudice that people bring with whether a woman could cheat or a man could cheat. And to your point, when you talk to somebody about a past experience, you really do help them begin to resolve it. So your work is definitely therapeutic, as art can be in general. And your work, obviously, it is an image, but it has a backstory that I feel is important to learn and to know. And maybe that's part of why they are books that you're putting together, because they're certainly deeper than one photograph thin, not to put down one thin photograph in any way. I just want to open up to other people. Thank you, Maria. Any other questions? You're welcome. Any other questions, or mute yourself. We do it Wild West here. Charlie, if you stop screen sharing, this way I could see. If you'd like, you can raise your hand. I'll try and moderate, but feel free to comment, anybody.
Sure, I'd like to comment. Maria joined, so I got through as far as just the second half of you said a practice. Are you a psychologist?
No, I am a photographer.
Okay. What was the, Robin had mentioned a comment, and I totally agree with it. The photographs that combine light and shadow were absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
What was the group that you were talking about, or the photography, what was it, gallery?
The museum.
It's a museum. It's a new museum in New York City. It's been open for a year, and it's only dedicated to photography. The name is Fotografiska.
Oh, okay. Yes, I've been there. It's fantastic.
I'm so glad you've been there, Mitch.
I posted from there also.
You okay?
Last question.
Tell me.
I saw it looked like a Richard Serra sculpture.
Yes. Did you? Oh, I think that you see. It's a building of Tadao Ando, the Japanese architect in Mexico. But it does follow that kind of curve. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
No, my pleasure.
And I just noticed in the chat, someone asked for the links to people's websites and Instagram. I just pasted all that.
Thanks, Charlie. Also, Susan Tiffin said she loved your work and your reasons for taking them. Robin Halpern commented, very interesting work. The light and shadows are captivating. Daryl Ann Saunders, I love the humanity aspect of your work. Thanks for sharing. It definitely is that. You definitely engage the people, but you do have a wide range because you engage the people and at the same time you shoot the buildings. And often you are talking about the absence of people in your building. So you do have a wide range. I do feel it disconcerting when you say how children have sort of changed during the pandemic. I worked as a counselor at a day camp. Kids react and act, like you said, very differently than grown-ups. They dance, they move. By working with them for 40 hours a week, I started to realize when I talk to my adult friends, this is a different kind of reaction. I like the kiddie reaction and action and interaction better.
I prefer it a million times. It's so honest. It's so beautiful.
They sing opera. I mean, they're totally moving, engaged. There's no like wall of glass between you and them. I mean, I would get hugs from the back from children that I did art with, and no adult comes up and does that to me, except at the wrong kind of bar. So yes, thanks for pointing it out. It is disconcerting, but as a photographer, you're capturing these sort of terrible times that are sitting with us moment by moment as if they're normal, but they are quite abnormal. And the shots that you capture, they'll be valuable in the future when they look back at this era. And that's always a role a photographer plays, to document his times or her times. Any other questions? And then we'll move on. Of course, yes, Leah. And of course, at the end, we will open it up to questions again. We'll be here to 9 p.m. tonight.
Maria, just a quick question. How long have you been at Fotografia?
I've been there for 1 year. Not 1 year, 4 months. 4 months, Larry.
Well, there was a fabulous African-American photographer who showed there. Her name is Tracy Chapman.
Oh,
Mhm.
that was a gorgeous show. Yes, that's the one. It's beautiful.
Extraordinary. Sorry she didn't have a book at the time. She refused to allow her photographs to be put into a book. I would have purchased it.
It would be a gorgeous publication. We should definitely review that. We should definitely.
Well, I would love her to review it. I'd buy the book.
Yes, I'll bring it up again in my next meeting because it's
Okay.
gorgeous. It's a gorgeous body of work, and
Oh,
Tawny
it's
is
stunning,
fantastic artist.
Barry,
Leah,
I'll send you guys a couple of pictures. You'll flip out.
all right, Leah, you had a question?
I have a very tough question for Maria.
Oh, Ilya, let's see.
Yes, and you're safe.
You don't have to answer it, but reflect on it maybe. And that is, what is portion of what you're driven to do is based on autobiography?
I love your question, Leah, because I think about that often, right? About like, how do I place myself in this? And every body of work, I feel like it has evolved and it has changed. But I can tell you that there's the one of the heartbroken women. I thought, why am I doing this? Why am I collecting these stories that are about pain? And this is very personal, Leah. I don't think I've ever said this in public. I've said it in my house. But I think that body of work is dedicated to my mother because she was the first woman I ever witnessed a real broken heart really close to me. And I was 13, I was 14. And I do remember being a structure of support within that emotional, roller coaster that she embarked on. And I thought, this one is really about my healing vital to someone of my past, which is my mother. So I think in that one, I know how I insert myself. The other ones, it fluctuates. It really does. Thank you for that question. It's
It's an
Good
excellent
question.
Yeah,
Great
it's an
question.
excellent reply. And I would say, because I'm at the other side of the spectrum of living life than you, and it gets very tiresome to have so many effigies of women as some kind of a shrieking, animated, crazy, off the charts person. Every one of your images is the deeper, quiet, reflective woman that we are, that we really are.
So we are,
Nobody
right?
wants to see that. That it doesn't sell newspapers, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Keep going. Yeah.
Thank you, Leah. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Just okay for a second. This is
Maria, I can't help but ask, why do you have the blue Fiance hippo on your wall?
Oh, it's our only magnet.
Ah, because
We
if
bought it
you
at
look
the
at
Met.
chat, I collect them and I have the book. It's just a thing from my
It's-
kids from many years.
It's adorable. We love him. Our Egyptian hippopotamus.
Well, he's a book.
Mesopotamian.
I
He's a
think
book.
Fran Beeler had a question. Yes, Fran?
Not so much a question as I recently saw a presentation about a man who does what he calls the poetry pharmacy, and somehow it made me think of you. He sets up, it's almost performance art, poetry, therapy, all rolled up into one. He sets up a place and people come to him with issues and he prescribes a poem for them. He tries to find the perfect poem, and he's published 2 books already. The Poetry Pharmacy. His name is William Seagart. Anyway, it just felt like it resonated.
Telling me. I'm gonna look for him.
Okay.
It's a beautiful
I have-
idea. Thank you.
Sure. And I love the work too. By the way, I meant to start with that,
Thank
but
you, Fran.
I think Regina
Thank you.
Gradis would like to say something.
Yes.
Hi, Maria. Thank you for your photos, and they touched me deeply. I was wondering, you seem to have social work skills in addition to photograph skills. Where do your skills and talents come from? Who do you think you inherited your passion and skills from?
That's a very beautiful question because it comes with a compliment. I think I'm a frustrated doctor. I think that medicine was my career. That's what I should have done, and that's what I should have been. And I didn't. And it's okay. I'm a very happy photographer. I'm a very happy artist, but I think that it's my way to at least tap on that, just very from the surface, very remote. But I think it's my way to honor that desire that I didn't, for some reason or the other, I just didn't end up being.
And your ancestors, which relatives might you find yourself inheriting your talents from?
I would probably say from my maternal grandmother. She was tough. She was, she was an independent woman for her time, but I think that she managed to be always available for her family, for her husband, for her kids, for her friends, she was a pillar. She was an emotional pillar to a lot of people that, including me. She was my favorite person. I think she.
Thank you so much. We could go on, but I want to get to the other.
It was my pleasure. You guys were the best audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Snaps and claps. That's how we do it at the ATOA.
I have one more thing I have to say.
Yes, Laura.
You were incredibly successful, and you gave us a lesson that we all should be taking very, very seriously, which is that your ideas were very simple ideas, and you executed them. That's the difference between having an idea and not being able to do it because it's too sophisticated. But you took a simple idea, and they're successful. That's a very successful formula. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawerence. I appreciate that.
Very nice. We're going to move to Magali Duzan. Again, if you have background noise, just mute yourself. Magali, welcome. Welcome to Artist Talk on Art. Try screen sharing if we run into a problem. We've got many to help here. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. And I can't believe I have to go after Maria's amazing presentation. But we'll see what I can do. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry to say, I've run into the same problem as Maria, so I'm happy this works. So I'm going to share 3 projects that kind of show how I hop around through photography as well as working with text and books and installation. And I wanted to start with this image, which I shot maybe 3 months ago, because it connects to the first project I'm going to show, but also is one of those things of like that project finished and I saw this image and it was so sort of perfect for the book that I had made. And it kind of ties into this idea that I work a lot with, which is sort of returning to ideas in my work, or kind of tangentially going from one thing to the next. So this is just a quick photo I made of the Waverly restaurant sign, which is on 6th across from West 4th, from the West 4th subway station. And I loved the fact that the entire neon sign had burnt out except for the word aura. And then it was this bizarre foggy night. I'd had dinner with a friend. And not only was the aura sort of glowing, it had this wild, like Fata Morgana reflection above it from the fog, which is something I have always like wanted to see, but never had seen. And it's something you tend to see, up in the Arctic, not quite with diner signs, but so I thought this was sort of a good way to start. So the first project I'm going to talk about kind of quickly before moving on to the next one is a book that I made with Conveyor Studio that came out at the end of 2019. And it's called The Moon and Stars Can Be Yours, Notes on Subway Psychics. And I do not believe in psychics, but I'm incredibly fascinated by belief. I think having been raised in New York City as a child of an atheist, something about how people believe and the rituals that go around with it it's interested me, but specifically so much recently, in terms of I started to do this research about psychics and how the rise in the interest of mysticism is so connected to these global crises, right? So you go to, after the First World War and an interest in seances and contacting the dead in the 60s, and so much unrest and sort of the age of Aquarius. And now we're for so many young people, so many millennials, there's this real kind of interest in horoscopes and how that's connected perhaps to so much uncertainty in the world. And of course, 2020 revealed a global pandemic. So this is an image that I made before I made the book from a project that I had done, that I had gone and I had my photograph, my aura photographed for 2 weeks every year. And I was kind of more interested in interacting with the women who would do it and to see how they kind of read my body language and what they read into these auras. But it was a project that I didn't really feel was successful, but the images that came with it were something. And so it wasn't until kind of 2018, 2019 when I started this book and I started to piece together the photographs I had made, photographs I had collected. So this is an aura from Magic Jewelry in Chinatown with this for entertainment purpose only stamp on the back, which I then kind of researched and learned that, you know, fortune telling is part of the Criminal Code of New York. It's a Class B misdemeanor. And so all psychic kind of ephemera has to be stamped with this term. And then of course it led me to Kino. If you have taken the subway in New York, you have seen a Kino ad. And I started maybe over the course of 5 years, just picking up all of these flyers on the subway and kind of deciding that I wanted to do something with it. And so kind of piecing together all of this ephemera into this book that became this image and text exploration of this question: why are people interested in psychics? Which ended up becoming then the text is a series of vignettes that are all framed around questions. And each question is kind of my personal question that I'm asking. So it's, you know, will I find love? Should I stay in New York? Should I continue to make art? The final question is, am I asking the right questions? And there's a lot of kind of humor and history built within it. And so sort of the opening page to give you the sense is this introduction that says, within 3 days of each other in March 2018, The Guardian ran 2 articles titled Stargazing, Why Millennials Are Turning to Astrology by Rebecca Nicholson, and Why Astrology is Turning to Millennials by Dean Burnett. So looking at these kind of back and forth aspects of so much of it. And so I just shared some spreads to also show sort of how I work within photography and text, sort of pulling research items, pulling images from the New York Public Library's picture collection, which I've worked with a lot. And so cropping images, making scans of them, doing filters to try to kind of piece them all together to get this visual language. And so this is sort of the first question. And then these are just some more spreads. So much of my work deals with perception in general, with the act of looking, the act of searching. And I often begin a project with a question or an idea and kind of just follow it until the medium kind of emerges. So whether that's straight photography, whether that's a book, whether that's an installation. And so these are just some more spreads of, you know, an image from Look magazine in the late 1930s that I had cropped and inverted, which goes with a section about Harry Houdini and the kind of psychic busters he worked with, and then some more of these flyers that we treated with the visual language of them is also kind of in your face and overwhelming, that the designer Alana Schlenker and my editor Christina Leiby, we had been going through them, looking at how we kind of condensed it, how we sort of created something to simplify it. And so it was 3 colors of paper that were much lighter than the other pages of the book. And that way they kind of held their own. They were black only on this colored paper. And so as you move through the book, you're kind of moving through my research process with me, asking the questions, getting some answers, some humorous sort of asides, but also some of the historical information there. And so I sort of started with that because that was one of my most recent projects, but also because I work on projects, multiple things at once, just in different formats that sometimes feed into each other, sometimes kind of help get to something else. And so a project that started before that, but is continuing, is one in which, you know, after doing all of this research and sort of working on a screen, I really wanted to work hands-on in the studio again. And I hadn't kind of been in the studio making work. And so I wanted to make photographs, but I felt a little caught up in like what type of a photograph I could make and why I wanted to make a photograph as opposed to a book. And I realized that the question I was kind of dealing with was it possible to experience an image being made? Could you actually watch a photograph be created? Because I think that was also maybe in working with digital work and working with text, I wanted to get back to the magic of photography, which for me was the magic of the first time in a dark room, the first time exposing film. And so I started a series of cyanotypes, which normally are exposed via the sun. But what I really wanted, again, was this idea of like, can you watch a photograph being made? Can you watch time imprinting itself onto a surface? And so I talked to a lot of people who all told me I was crazy and I couldn't do it. And I started leaving projectors on, exposing through cinefoil, finally getting to the point where I knew that I could use a slide projector as a light source to expose a piece of cyanotype chemical coated fabric. And from there, then I wanted to think about what type of an image I wanted to make. And so I started making photographs of the ocean and creating them into slides and then exposing them for very long periods of time. So I was doing a residency and they hated me because I was leaving slide projectors plugged in overnight and telling them like that it was fine, that nothing would burn down because the bulb would explode beforehand, and which didn't really do the trick to calm anyone's nerves, but it did work. And so many of these images are exposures that have taken anywhere from a day to a week. And what that means then is that the exposure also incorporates everything that's happening in that period of time. So it doesn't become a reproduction, it's really a translation of an image. So these are two exposed and then washed, so set images that were in a show in Brooklyn about a year and a half ago. And then I wanted to show a video to show you how this actually works. So I'm going to try something fancy, I think, maybe. Okay. And so this is from my studio where I set up some examples to show how the slide projector is actually exposing the image. And so there are two separate ones and it comes into focus. And so this is the image shining onto the canvas. And when you turn it off, you start to see where it's begun to actually burn into the image. And then when it moves away, you see it again. And so this really became this idea of an expanded photograph, the experience of the photograph, in that in a gallery, this is what you encounter. You get to see the image burning away. You get to, you know, you kind of have to encourage people to walk through the stream. Oh, there I am. To actually walk through the light stream, to put their hand in front of it, to hear the projector whirring. It becomes this very sort of physical experience of an image, which I really loved, because this push and pull of a physicality and an ephemerality was, I think, something that I personally at the time needed to be experiencing in my work. And then the other aspect of it is that it's not only the image being created, it's also the original image, the slide, sort of fading, burning away. And so it becomes really this life cycle of creating an image, because in order to expose the image, you have to start to burn away the slide. And so these are all scans of slides from varying exposure times. So on the left, the black and white image, which is actually a color image, how it's processed, is the starting point. And then over the course of time, you know, the purplish one is maybe a day and a half of exposure, the brownish one, 2 days of exposure, and so on. And so I've been documenting then not only the images that are made that sometimes actually don't work or overexpose, but also the kind of end point of the slides themselves. And so that's a project that I've continued to work on and sort of tweak and change to be site responsive as well. And then I wanted to close again with another book project that also deals with light, to sort of show how some of the ideas maybe pop up in one project and then come back in another. But this is sort of just like a studio slide of inspiration and imagery. So all of the images are ones that I've taken in my research, except for the top right, which is the burned through film from the Trinity tests, which were the atomic bomb tests, which were so overexposed because the brightness was just impossible to capture. And so this is a piece that I'm working on that will be a book, as well as a series of photographs and prints. And it's looking at just the history of light in this kind of somewhat overwhelming way. So the history of light conceptually, linguistically, visually. And it started because in 2013, I read this article in the Times that I clipped out that described the meteorite that fell in Siberia. And a woman who was interviewed described it with the words, "It was a light which never happens in life. It happens probably only at the end of the world." And then a few years later, I read a New Yorker article about the Trinity tests for the atomic bomb, where somebody was describing watching the bomb tests, and they said the whole sky suddenly full of white light, like the end of the world. And I thought there was something really kind of haunting about these experiences of light phenomena and just the grappling to try to describe it. And so it's a very kind of early project, but I'm looking at light phenomena and how to photograph that. So the image on the left is of an ecliptic, which is the sun's apparent path through the universe. But again, it's the apparent path. It's a scientific model or a scientific explanation, but it never looks quite like what we might think it would, what the diagram would. And so sort of, it's again a very early project, but looking again at these questions of how do we describe things, how do we experience, how do we perceive. And so I just kind of wanted to throw that in at the end, and then show just another set of images. And this is just the color version of it. And again, looking through my own archive, because the image on the left of kind of this beveled glass is used in one of the first images I showed as well. So I work through archival material sometimes, but then I also go through my own archive to kind of piece things back together. And I think that is everything. So I am going to, I guess, stop my screen share. And thank you. If I motor mouthed my way through that, my apologies.
No, you did great. That was a beautiful presentation. Very nice.
Yay!
It strikes on a thought that I've had. I realize our limitations. We see everything in moments. And I liken it to a book. A book has pages, but it is a whole book. And I like your effort to try and capture light, not in a moment, but have long exposures a day or a week. And I think you're trying to get at like a spiritual core of who we are and get us beyond that sort of one-shot image. And I love the way you've degraded the image of the sea, and we see it in different phases. I imagine you're a big fan of Muybridge, someone who captured time, as one of the original photographers to see how horses move and things like that. But it definitely seems like a spiritual search for you. And yet at the same time, early on, you discussed how you gather the detritus of the city, the sort of objects left, the ads. And in that way, you're sort of cataloging the zeitgeist by what's left around. And you really do capture, again, it's doing something simple, sometimes capture something complex and meaningful. And of course, your attempt to try and capture yourself seeing, or the camera capturing, it's very much in meditation and in certain practices, you try and see yourself seeing. And it's very complicated to do because any consciousness will sort of freeze the moment. So, I applaud you. I found it fascinating and right up my alley. And in some way, simply beautiful images that, maybe we don't see. I'd like to open it up to other questions and thoughts before we move on to our third presenter. Feel free to unmute yourself. And yes, Michael Krasowitz.
Hi, I enjoyed your presentation. You made me think of something, because I'm a film guy from way back. So, and there used to be a thing called reciprocity law failure with black and white film. And the idea was that if you exposed film with too much light, the curve of the exposure would invert itself. So I actually made a picture. I don't know, you guys might remember, some might know this as well. But so like the thing on the left, the shadows and the highlights, depending on the exposure, the density would build up on the curve. And when you got to a certain point, if you exposed it too much, it would invert itself.
Oh, okay.
And the picture you showed of the nuclear explosion, I think, is an example of the tones flipping.
Yeah, no, exactly. That sort of black center, which isn't what is being described, but that flip from one to the other.
Yeah, it was an interesting effect, and it might be something interesting to think about in the future.
Oh no, definitely. Thank you so much for that.
Natalia, have you ever seen the book A Thousand Suns?
No, I haven't.
It's an extraordinary book that has cataloged every one of the nuclear explosions that we as a country have set off. First off, the book, when you look at the pictures, is very scary.
Yeah.
You look at really what you're looking at and you understand that it's staggering. But your picture, of course, is one of the first ones that's in the book, the Trinity. But if you get your hands on that, I think it'll give you a lot more visual information that may work into what your process is thinking about.
Yeah. Oh no, thank you for that suggestion. It's perfect. The project is still at such an early phase where it's kind of trying to find itself, and that sounds so helpful.
I'd like to read one or two comments. Darrell Ann Saunders says, fascinating, the slowing down of time by capturing its evolution on a product, a projector, a cyanotype, the slide decaying. Lucy Wilner says, fascinating ideas. You photographers really know what to capture from the visual landscape. And Robin Halpern, to you, your work is quite beautiful and creatively presented and expressed. Love the idea of your images on the unstretched canvas. Yes, that canvas that you had that went down and then onto the floor was a very strong image. Linda Vigdor, these cyanotype exposures are great, intriguing images and process. And I think you have a blend there. Your work reads both very intellectual and very, I'm at a loss for words, but very sensational in the best possible way. They have a sensual appeal, and they also have an intellectual appeal. And you have your own sense of coloration that's obvious. We've discussed that. Basha Ruth Nelson loved the Blue Ocean installation artwork. She can feel the movement. Sharon Denning loved the process and results. I'll open it up to one more question, and then we'll move forward. Anybody, or then again, it can be a statement.
I have a kind of question.
Yes, Priscilla.
Hi, Magali. I wanted to say I really appreciate the diverse uses that you make of photography, and also the wide range of ideas and questions that you engage with, and also your amazing ability to find a way to tie them together in a coherent form, which I appreciate greatly as somebody who also works with different processes and ideas. I'm also fascinated by belief systems and work with oracles and divination as part of my conceptual framework too. So I was really interested to see what you did with that. And I was wondering, you probably saw this in the New York Times in November 2019. There's an article about this guy who goes and tries to find Keanu.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a pretty interesting
I remember it was this funny thing of the book came out at the New York Art Book Fair. I had been working on it for quite some time. I had so many great conversations. People seemed interested in it. And then it became that thing of every single person sending me articles saying like, did you hear, did you hear, did you hear? And I remember reading that and being so interested in the article and his sort of search to look for this person, but kind of, and I don't want to say cringing, but having that moment of kind of like, ooh, it was such a, I felt like he was doing it in this gotcha way that felt like one way to approach this, but I think there wasn't quite the sense, like I said before, I don't believe it, but I really believe in other people's belief systems. And I believe that there are psychics who are crazy scammers and just, you know, like you need to stay away from them with a 10-foot pole, but also that it's so much more complicated because these people also serve a purpose of in some ways being a therapist or just someone to talk to, or, and not that you should then try to make it something it isn't, but it's been interesting to read so many of these articles and to see sort of the slant of whether it takes it into a larger context or is something a little more, I don't know if I want to say one note, but very kind of, you know, trying to expose something, which this Kino person is a scammer, but just.
But I appreciate, yeah, I mean, yeah, it is a completely different approach, but also interesting that you have that commonality and did take such a different approach with Kino. But anyway, I don't want to take up too much time, but I'd love to continue dialoguing with you sometime about divination and oracles and belief systems as fertile fields of artistic exploration.
That sounds like a panel talk to me. So if you want, put together a panel, that would be very interesting. Larry, I'm going to move on to the next presenter, Sylvia Hardy. Sylvia, welcome. And where are you zooming in from, Sylvia?
Hi, I'm zooming in from Long Beach, LA area of California. So the sun just started coming in even stronger. We'll see how it goes, but I'm going to share my screen anyways. Are we ready? Let's see if I can find it. Okay, can you see?
Well done, well done.
So just starting, is this grid in here now? Just for reference, I wanted to start with the image that Charlie shared. Let's see if I can make this bigger. So. Is it slightly larger? Okay.
It's actually,
No?
it's blank now, unless it's, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sometimes when I go to full screen, it does that. So I'm just gonna stay here then.
Works good.
Okay. So this is a piece from 2015, so a little bit of an older work. But I wanted to start with something that I was working on around that time, but it was continuous. So this was started in 2011, so already almost 10 years old, which is amazing. And it was a piece that I made when I was working with various black and white analog photo papers, mural sized, just all various sizes, various brands. And some of them I was finding discarded, a lot of them, older pieces of paper that weren't going to be used in the darkroom anymore. So I started collecting them all, and eventually what made the most sense for my art practice was bringing them out into nature and exposing them to the light that's happening in national parks primarily, but different various locations in the United States, in this place, this kind of mythical place of the West. And this one in particular was also exposed in Birmingham, Alabama. And then I would collect different samples of soil, rocks. These would be rolled out, let's say the Grand Canyon. This one I think went quite a few different places. And so while it was being laid out and exposed to the natural light, twigs would get gathered on the paper, tears would happen. Nothing was fragile about this whole process at all. It was really, to me, about trying to collect a more physicality of the landscape through photography than what I saw the landscape photographs of the past being able to achieve at this point in 2011. And trying also to bring back to New York City, where I was working at the time, bring back something more physical of those natural locations to New York City, because it just didn't feel like a landscape photograph would cut it anymore. It just felt I needed to find another way to create a landscape photograph. So this one, the colors really change depending on the chemicals from the chemistry of the brand. So some of them will start out, where you see the brighter blue. That's a like younger photograph, or younger piece of photograph being exposed to the light. And then depending on the chemistry, it'll gray out. It will kind of fade out to this dark purple or mauve color, which in some sense is kind of like the chemistry exhausting itself, basically. And so since then, I think that piece was kind of more of a sculpture to me, like a sculptural photograph and a one-off piece in a sense. But then more recently, I guess in the last year and a half, I've been going back to working with that mural photographic paper, but doing a hybrid process of putting it through an Epson printer, like a 98 Epson printer, and printing digital ink images onto the analog paper being exposed to atmospheric light. So this one is an anomaly for me because it's more architectural, there's a person in it. But I think this kind of gives you a good idea of the scale of the photograph. And this other idea that's coming into play with these ones where I'm hanging them on the wall, and it's really about the viewer standing on one side of the image and kind of contemplating the physicality of it in space. So the image on the left is the installation view. The image on the right is the installation shot being inverted. So going forward, this is kind of, you know, more the general landscape based or more natural image that's on these mural photographs. This one, and a lot of these are taken with iPhone photos and then printed onto the mural paper, which I've tried doing larger format or film photographs printed onto the paper, but I find the iPhone photos feel the most right in a sense. It's really hard to see, and let's see. It's hard to see digitally and through installation photos. I wish you guys could all be here in real life. But the physicality that happens when printing a lower resolution image digitally onto the analog paper, I think achieves this more visceral quality that I'm looking for, where it's almost like the digital ink is suspended onto the chemistry of the analog photo paper. And sometimes, you know, depending on how, because each of these prints is unique and the analog paper is not meant to go through the Epson printer, a lot of times tears will happen or, you know, printing errors happen. But I kind of just embrace those errors and that quality because it lends more of a physicality to me. And it also is kind of showing that struggle of the digital and the physical coming together. But what's really interesting to me about these in real life is how, depending on where you put these prints and hang them up in an architectural space, they will change very differently. So for example, one like this, I think it was in a space where it got a lot of sunlight coming through the window because it was in a room with a large window. So it would change from a bright blue and then exhaust itself to the darker purple very quickly. Whereas, sorry, going through a lot of these. This one was a photograph that I put in one of the rooms that is in the space with a window just facing east, basically, and minimal light coming in. So this photograph was transitioning from, you know, the bright blue to exhausting itself extremely slowly just because there wasn't much light coming in through the window. But then as soon as you put it into a different space, it'll change very quickly. But to see the works in a space where you can, you know, see them changing over time and see the sun, you know, hitting something directly in one room and then slowing something down in another room is really beautiful to me. But again, very hard to show in digital slides. These are a couple more installation photos. I'm still playing with this idea of showing the inverted version of the photo as a way of presenting the work to people or presenting it online. I think it does help explain the work in some ways. But these inverted installation images aren't the actual work itself.
Sylvia, can you explain what you mean by inverted? I mean, I assume you're playing with the positive and negative.
Yeah, so this is the installation shot that I took, and then I'll invert it in Photoshop to show basically that the print that I'm printing onto the analog photo paper is a negative of the positive iPhone photo or the positive.
In other words, this is the actual image and you're showing how you translated it in the original print, like you translated it into this.
Mhm.
I see.
And then this is kind of going back to the the positive version of what I photographed, but it's still that it didn't look like that at all because just the whole process of making it hybrid, like the analog on the analog photo paper, and then the quality of the ink not being able to saturate into the photo paper properly, makes it kind of more vintage feeling, or
Yeah.
more ephemeral feeling in that way. But yeah, that's.
Barry, is it okay if I ask a question? Because if it goes past these images, then I won't be able to relate it to what I'm looking at right now.
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. I just wondered what you mean by also where it says the explanation, silver gelatin paper exposed to light and digital ink. So exposed to light and digital ink, I don't understand that.
Well, just that it's being exposed to light constantly. So it's none of these photo papers have been fixed.
But what's the digital ink part of it? That's the part I don't get.
And then the digital ink, I guess it kind of feels like the digital ink is creating an image in a way onto the silver gelatin paper. Like it's almost like a negative maybe being suspended onto the photo paper.
So I thought you meant literally like a printer. That's why I was getting confused, silver gelatin. So are you talking about this digital ink is like a terminology that you're sort of using, or you've actually utilized digital ink in some way? That's what I didn't understand.
Oh yeah, no, I have utilized the digital ink. I'll put the mural analog photo paper that's traditionally used in the black and white darkroom through a digital Epson printer and print ink onto the analog photo paper.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thanks. Got it. Really.
Sorry, I haven't talked about my work in a couple months. Or maybe even longer with COVID. So
I do want to read a comment. Robin Halpern said, your work is beautifully moody with such subtle coloration and line, especially like the image with the person walking down the stairs. Nice comment. Thank you, Robin. Go ahead, Sylvia, continue. The work is both very beautiful, and I can certainly see why Charlie brought you artists together. There is a link. All artists are unique and different, but I can see the link between your work and the previous artists.
Well, and this mixture of kind of unfixing a photograph and the hybrid process, to me, started most initially is just questioning, the origins of photography and questioning why fixing the photograph is so important to us, especially when it comes to landscape photographs, because nature is constantly evolving, constantly changing. I think our relationship to the environment and to nature right now is critical, that we understand how it's changing and that we need to change and embrace change and not think of nature as a static photograph that we go out and we seek and we take a picture of and then quickly, go home and post it as some photographers say, as a trophy photograph of being on the top of that mountain or saying you went somewhere. And not to say that those gestures aren't beautiful and vernacular and really important to people, but as someone interested in photography and the history of our relationship to nature and how national parks have been able to be made public spaces and saved as spaces because of photography, I think at this point I'm starting to question, how can we think about it more as this changing physical space, and also questioning, a little more science fiction, but some of this stuff I'm starting to think about is, how are we going to move or take our ideas of nature and photographs of nature to other planets? Like, let's say people are living on Mars or whichever planet, like what would be the best way to take some landscape photographs to that planet that represent Earth. And are they digital or are they more physical in form? Are they images that are static, or are they images that maybe are rolled up and have a lot of potential for viewing in the future, or have soil and tears and the physicality of actually touching Earth? So those are just some of the ideas I've been going through. I'm going to make it short today because I know we're a little short on time, and I want to hear Charlie's work.
Oh, thank you so much, Sylvia. And definitely interesting thoughts you bring up. I'll open up to maybe just one question. So we'll move to Charlie, and then we'll ask some, if you could stop screen sharing, Sylvia. I definitely will say I love the light that came in through your window and sort of was almost too much light and overlit, sort of made reference to our previous speakers. I'll open it up to one question and then move to Charlie. And of course, at the end, we'll have questions. Or it could be no questions. We'll save it for the end.
Everybody.
We'll save it for the end. Let's go to Charlie. Again, I want to thank Charlie. And if you noticed, one of the artists said, you know, how Charlie helped me with this. Charlie helped me with that. The other artists were thankful. Artists, you know, many artists just work on their own work. Then there are some artists who actually go out of their way to help other artists. Maybe they write about artists. Maybe they're involved with a gallery. Maybe they bring panels together. I sense Charlie is that kind of an artist. And it's a very important role. Artists, I like to say, what's an artist's favorite song? Me, 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 me. And that's very true. But Charlie is an artist that it's not all about him. And of course, you know, all of us, we are very much about our work. But Charlie has done something good by bringing this panel together. And we need artists that help other artists. It's a very important part of the community. So thank you, Charlie, and I look forward to hearing you present about your work.
Thank you, Barry. That's a great point. That's what it's all about. And it's so nice to be here during all these, even during the pandemic, we get caught up in our daily lives, and it's nice to be in a community with like-minded people and people that are spiritual and just stop and think about different things for an hour or two. So thanks for putting this together. I didn't actually expect to share much of my work because I wanted to hear the other people, but I will just walk through my website quickly. Here we go. Okay, and you know, listening to you guys talk about your work, first of all, thank you, it was amazing. And you know, we haven't really been able to do studio visits or anything like this for a while, so it was great getting a refreshment of all your work. And it kind of like, as I heard you guys share, I was kind of like making threads again in my mind, and I was thinking about how some of you use you know, iPhone photos, and some of you use found objects, and then like just things you see on the street. And I'm kind of realizing that I also do those three things together. So, you know, the work in general is, I work from an archive of photos, and then I go back and I start layering the photos, whether it's rescanned with different found materials or ink on paper, or messing around with scanning an image in a different way. So a lot of the work is, you know, just quick snapshots and then totally reworked and trying to bring importance back into the image in a way. You know, this is a project I did almost 10 years ago. And then I'll show you some more recent pieces. Where is it? This is a body of work I've been working on with photos from my iPhone and found objects. And then I printed them on canvas and then kind of reworked the images again over and over again, like kind of creating new histories for each of the images in a way. So again, it's just like working from this quick snapshot of images and then trying to kind of, you know, rework the image in a way to bring some kind of different meaning into it.
Charlie, is it possible to enlarge the images?
Yeah, let me see.
Charlie, is there a way to understand what you do to each image? Is there, you have a series of images that we could start from an A to B and to C to D?
Oh, to show you the process?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's see. I actually don't have something. Let me see if I can find something like that. Let's see. No, I actually don't. That's an interesting point. I don't have something like that set up because I really look at just like the end image as being that final image. I don't really you know, because the first image that I start with, in my mind, I kind of think that the composition is missing something, or I want to kind of like animate something in this fantastic way, or like
No, I totally get that.
yeah, I just don't have I just don't have an example. That's a good idea though. For my next talk, I'll kind of like show the process a little more.
And then they asked Van Gogh to paint a cypress tree in front of them all.
But yeah, I mean, this is my website, and you know, I post a lot of process images on my Instagram. It's just my name here. And then I do these portraits of a different artists too for different publications and friends, and it's a nice way to create another community like Barry was talking about. But yeah, so I wasn't expecting to do a whole talk myself. I was more interested in the people that were here, but I just wanted to show you guys my website.
Charlie, can you tell us a little bit about why photography and sort of how you first maybe got involved in your history?
Yeah, I mean, for me, photography was like the fastest way to share a composition that I had in my mind, you know, faster than painting or any other processes that I had in mind, you know, at the time of delving into art. But, you know, I guess, like you were saying, everyone has a cell phone now. So after a while, I felt like this archive of images I was amassing kind of lost its meaning, and you know, I was feeling that the images I was taking just like weren't special in a way, or like anyone could take it, or you know, it didn't really represent much. And I think that's why I started reworking the images in a certain way and making books and kind of like getting them off the screen and putting different compositions together. I don't know if you can see my screen. So I love making books. So this is let me get rid of this.
So Charlie, this picture, did the screen be the image you had, or was it the image you brought to the flowers?
Oh, the screen is actually the paper that the flowers are printed on. So I love working with different like paper materials and printing things out. This is like a large format zine I made with the same body work I'm sharing on the screen. And you know, I love just getting the images off the screen and looking at them at different ways. This is a book I'm working on now. It's not going to be this color, but this is going to be the cover. And it's a new body of work that I was, you know, similar images like painted over and reworked in a way.
Actually, if you unshare, we'll be able to see what you're showing us better.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, because it's sort of like teeny.
Yeah.
Unless we pull the thing over the screen over.
Stop being so generous and sharing everything.
Michael Krasowitz asked Charlie if you're familiar with the photographer Ralph Gibson. He works.
No, I'll look it up. I'll write it down.
He says he works in the book form. One well known is the Somnambulist.
Cool.
Leah asked an interesting question. Charlie, are you looking for the photo or is the photo finding you?
I think the photo finds me. I'm like walking around and I'll notice something and I'll just like feel like I have to use it in some way, you know, or like can picture that as a jumping off point for an adventure and like making a canvas or starting off and layering it in something else, etc.
Thanks.
Someone wrote, please show the zine again. Is this one? It's kind of big, so it's hard to.
Yeah, yeah. I was interested in the way it's bound and stuff. It kind of looks
Oh
cool.
yeah, it's a wire bound. So it's very. I love using these very simple, like utilitarian methods to share work. It's like very cheap paper, you know.
Well, there's some physicality to it. There's some retro. You know, a lot of things that were done in the past really were good. So sometimes going back to some photographs you can hold. I think a lot of the artists today made reference to the photograph being degraded over time, to the physicality, to touching, to the effect of light in the room on the photo. A lot of, you know, it is a real object. It is a real object.
Someone asked, are you digitally painting or physical paint applications? You know, some of the pieces I physically paint over and that's the final like one of one product. And then some pieces I'll rescan and, you know, it becomes like this digital file where I can print out endless copies.
I noticed that you had something where it was printed on both sides. So I was just wondering, hi, by the way, thanks for sharing. I just was wondering if you're printing that or you're getting it printed. In other words, are you supplying, say, your prints to have them bound or they're printing it and they're binding it?
Oh yeah, it depends on like how many I'm making and what the purpose is. So I have a book that I published a couple of years ago with Conveyor that, you know, I provided all the image and they helped me make it and they printed it. But you know, and then there's some pieces where I'll print it myself if I'm only making a couple, or I view it as more of like a, you know, more of like an art piece.
Yeah.
Itself, you know, like printing both sides of the paper. And yeah. So
several of you guys have mentioned Conveyor. It seems like that's a good company to work with for printing, I guess.
Yeah, check it out. It's Conveyor Editions.
I'll have to check that out because.
Let's see. I don't, you know, I live in the city. I don't know why most of my work has mainly nature in it.
That's because you want to get out of the city.
Yeah, maybe, probably. I keep asking myself. But,
where'd you grow up, Charlie?
I grew up in New Rochelle, just outside the city.
New Rochelle High School, class of '78, right here.
Oh yeah, we talked.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. Class of '04 over here.
I grew up the same year that Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner discovered the 2,000-year-old man.
Again, photography that speaks to both the sensual side and the intellectual side. So to want to know how are these images combined, put together, they're both real and they're not real. I would say they try and be transportive, like most of the work we saw today tries to transport you to maybe a higher plane that's really right in front of our eyes, just maybe obscured by the light. I'd like to ask the four artists that presented, we'll start with you, Charlie. You did all say you went to the same school together. Was that SVA?
Parsons.
Parsons, sorry. How would you say your school days and what you learned there has influenced or not influenced your work?
I mean, for me, it was just great having the community of like I was saying, like-minded people, and the opportunity just to like focus on the once in a lifetime opportunity just to like focus on creating for a year or two. Because I didn't go to grad school. I mean, I didn't go to art school before that, so it was priceless, really.
Charlie, can you undo your page so we can get everybody's picture up?
Oh yeah, there you go.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Charlie. And I'll open it up. I did throw a question out, so any of the presenters feel free to jump in. As well, anybody else, feel free to jump in with any question at any time. Loudest voice sort of rules the day here at the Wild West Zoom of the ATOA.
Barry, I wanted to ask a question of Maglia and Sylvia, is it? The young woman, where'd she go? Sylvia, yeah. Some years ago, I had the great opportunity to meet and then see the show of Terrell at the Guggenheim. Do either of you know who Terrell is? And the reason I pose that question is because he is very focused on light and the changing of lights in the world, in nature. So have either of you seen his work or been exposed to it, and has it influenced you at all?
Yeah, definitely. I saw the show at the Guggenheim, but when I did my undergraduate degree in Pittsburgh at Carnegie Mellon University, and there's a museum there called the Mattress Factory, which has permanent installations of his work. And I remember when I first got there, like 18, seeing the works in person. I had seen things, online, but to actually experience them and in a smaller space, I think where you really have these one-on-one experiences, because with so much of his work, depending on where it is, I feel like there's a bit of the sort of spectacle that comes with it. But,
without a doubt, right.
But yeah, I'm a big fan of his work, and a lot of the sort of light and space artists of that era as well. So it's a good reference and someone I kind of come back to a lot.
Mm-hmm. I'm hoping someday to get out to the volcano.
That'd be amazing.
For all of you who don't know what the volcano is, Terrell is a light artist. He focuses on the changing of light. And many years ago, he bought a dormant volcano and has channeled out the entire lava tubes of the volcano to a central focus where the caldera is open over your head. And you are sitting in a volcano watching the light of the sky change. So that's what I was referring to.
I think at this point, I want to say thank you again to all the presenters and to Charlie. I think you all did a great job. This was
it's so fun.
This was fun. This was a deep dive into photography. No question about it. Thank you all for your time. I always like to say that's our most valuable commodity, the one that's in limited supply. And we are artists talk on art. We happen when you artists talk about art. And that's what happened. We are a 501c3. We have talks every Monday. It'll be the same Zoom link. You can see our website, atoanyc.org. We have some very interesting talks coming. If you're not on our mailing list and you want to be and you haven't posted it just yet, feel free to email me. You'll see it on our website. I'll make sure you're on. I just want to give a shout out to what's coming up next week. We have 4 different artists presenting. It is a sort of open presentation, but several artists have already signed up. Jay Critchley, a performance artist, will be presenting. Lionel DeVigna, a photographer as well, will be presenting. Barbara Schaefer and Nick Jarrett, the branding on Instagram. Nick, an excellent photographer as well. So there will be a little chime into what we just saw and was presented. I do also want to point out Michael Krasowitz does a talk. I believe it's Wednesday now, Michael. Yes? You do
Wednesday at 7.
Wednesday at 7. He does a forum where artists can come and talk and present their art. It's quite good. I found it very enjoyable and seen a lot of friendly faces there. So I do want to thank you all again. It's Artist Talk on Art. Thank you so much, Charlie. So nice to see you.
Yeah.
You're a good spirit, Charlie. It's so obvious. You're a good guy, and you brought together besides great artists, you brought together a good group of people. It's so nice to see.
All right, y'all. Stay in touch.
Thank you for having us.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Here.